Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, and as always told out of Voice of Radio. So today, we need to take a little bit of a look at Ampharos V. Now, I've mentioned in a couple of my videos lately, I'm currently playing through Heart Gold, and one of the stalwarts of my team has been Ampharos. So that's made me pretty excited about the prospect of getting an Ampharos V. The question is, should I have been excited, or should I have been more grown up and less excited? Well, it probably won't surprise you to learn that our translation comes from the lovely Antoine Boulet, one of our very favourites here, and the artwork is at least awesome. Starting off with the basics, we've got 210 HP, which is fine. It's about right. We got a retreat cost of 3, which means you've got to still use energy if you want to retreat with Air Balloon, and it means you're too low to use buff padding. It is, as far as I'm concerned, the worst retreat cost in the game right now. And you've got a weakness to fighting, which is a shared weakness with stuff like Pikachu and Zekrom and Eternatus V Max, which is to say, not the weakness that you want right now. And honestly, being a lightning Pokemon, you've lost a lot of your tricks. You've lost Thunder Mountain to reduce your attack cost. You've lost Electro Power to do extra damage, which is kind of sad we're mentioning that in this video, given of course that the Ampharos GX was the one that really made amazing use of Electro Power. Every time you attacked with it, you got to put all your Electro Power from your discard pile into your hand. It seemed really good. It was never even remotely good, and that was a little bit sad. Worth pointing out that you do still have Tapu Koko to accelerate a little bit of energy, so it's not all bad, ladies and gentlemen. But what about the attacks? Well, the first attack, 1 lightning, 1 colorless energy, 50 damage plus confusion. Okay, so it's not much damage per se, but the confusion's kind of fun. I mean, confusion, you flip a coin, and if tails, you take 30 damage, and the attack you were using fails. So, confusion's kind of awkward. And what you're really trying to do here is force your opponent into an awkward situation. Force your opponent into a coin flip. Now, they might flip heads. If they do flip heads, gutted, I suppose. Things have gone wrong. But if they flip tails, they've wasted an attack, and they've taken damage, and that's kind of beautiful. Like, for you, that is a really good thing to do. But it's not a huge amount of damage, which means if your opponent is able to flip heads, you've basically just done 50 damage for 2 energy. Now, that's not to say that's a bad thing, but it is to say when you've got a 2-prize liability in the active and you're letting your opponent have the next hit, maybe you want to do something slightly better than just doing 50 damage. And it's an eminently payable attack. You can pay this attack by just using Tapu Koko and attaching an energy. The question you've got to basically ask yourself is this doing enough? Now, one I would suggest here quite strongly is Galamine, and I've mentioned Galamine in a few videos lately, but Galamine here is basically perfect. What it does is it increases the retreat cost of both active Pokemon by 2. So essentially what you do is you confuse them, you force them to flip a heads in order to attack, so one of their first reactions is going to be, look, joke's on you, I'm going to retreat. So by using Galamine, you basically stop the retreating, and then maybe they still got a switch, or maybe they've got a single prize Pokemon in the active and a scoop up net, and if they do, they do, and that's sad. But if they don't, they're flipping. But then again, we're into potentially awkward territory here, because now we're going, well, if they've got a switch, but if they don't have a switch, they can still flip a heads. And then it's kind of getting annoying. Because now they've got multiple options to get around it. If they don't have a switch, and if they flip tails, this is amazing. But what are the chances they're not going to be able to get around it? Like, what are the chances that they both don't have a switch and flip tails? Maybe not that high. Which I suppose puts this into the situation of, it's kind of a fun little attack, but you need to be able to have a second attack that can back it up. And maybe we do. 2 lightning, 1 colorless energy, 120 damage, plus 30 damage to each of your opponent's bench Pokemon with any damage counters on. Oh! Yeah, no, this is making me sit up and pay attention. I have told you that one of my favourite Pokemon coming out in the near future is the new Salamence V. And Salamence V, for 3 colorless energy, does 30 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon. Now, to be fair, that is 3 colorless energy, so that's Welder and Attach for turn. And to be fair, it is just to all of your opponent's Pokemon they don't have to have damage on. But this does 120 to the active, and then 30 to all of the bench. So not hitting 30 to the active, not a big deal. So maybe we can start actually thinking this might be viable. And really, the best thing we've got to use here is going to be Roxy. Roxy, you can discard 2 Pokemon from your hand, drawing 3 cards for each one discarded, and if you discard a Coughing or a Wheezing, you get to put 1 damage counter on each of your opponent's Pokemon. And this deck does see a bit of play here and there, but it is very much a fringe deck. Maybe this is what's needed. Because the theory here essentially is, yes, I'm spreading a little bit of damage around, but then I am smashing with Ampharos. I mean, if you use Roxy, you put probably, hopefully, 2 damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon. And then you drop this, and all of a sudden your opponent's taking 50 damage onto each of their Pokemon. Plus you're actually doing 140 to the active. And maybe we're on to something here. And this, for me, is the hook when we're talking about Ampharos V. This is when I start looking at it being really good. Because now I can go, well, actually, at first attack, maybe I do just get turn 1 Confusion. Maybe I do 50 damage and Confusion, and it's not perfect, fine. But it doesn't need to be perfect, because I'm going to be starting to spread a whole bunch of damage. So maybe that buys you a turn to use an extra Roxy and then really start spreading damage. And that's how Ampharos ends up looking very good. The first attack is underwhelming, and I make no apologies about saying that. But it is a nice, if you've got nothing else, if it's turn 1, etc. kind of attack. Now you can actually get a ridiculous turn 1 going with Ampharos, though it will be a little bit of work. Here's what you need. You need to get 2 lightning energy in the discard, and you need to get a Tapu Koko to accelerate 1 energy to Ampharos and 1 to another bench Pokemon. You need an energy switch to put that second energy onto Ampharos and an energy to attach from your hand, and then obviously a way to get Ampharos into the active. You then need Roxy and 2 in any combination of Coughing and Wheezing. And I know that's quite a lot, although bearing in mind you'll be using Roxy to draw 6 cards, you can use the Dene, you could always use something like Jirachi, etc. And then if you pull that off, that is 140 to whatever's in the active, and you're doing 50 damage to each of your opponent's bench Pokemon, and this is going to add up very, very quickly. The real question I've been asking myself since I saw this card is, do I prefer it to Salamence? And the honest answer is I still don't know. I love with Salamence it's just Welder, free energy, go. Whereas this is far more awkward. But the fact that you're doing 120 to the active is really huge. And the other thing to bear in mind, let's say you do get this turn 1 with Ampharos, you're basically saying to your opponent, you need to knock it out now. Because if you don't knock it out now, I am doing 120 to the active and 30 to each of your bench if I don't play any more Roxy. And then it really is just building up. And if your opponent takes like 3 turns to KO Ampharos, that might be it. It might already be over at that stage. And that's how this ends up looking so gosh darn good here. I do think there is a huge amount of potential with Ampharos. It is so much more awkward than Salamence, and maybe that just means we'll all use Salamence instead. But the fact of the matter is here, you have got a Pokemon that can absolutely wreck your opponent's board, that can get going nice and early, and that will be devastating when it does. And Salamence has been a good deck over in Japan, winning a bunch of tournaments. Tell me that people aren't going to try it with Ampharos. I'm going to go ahead and give it between 3 and 4 Wassies. We don't give half Wassies, that would be barbaric. If it was a little bit less awkward, oh my word, this score would be a lot higher. As it is, I think there is potential, but it is going to take a bit of effort to realise it. You have been warned. But I'd like to know what you think about it. So let me know in the comment section, would ya? Go nuts, be nice! And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWassie, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.